Well, people sometimes plead to things that turn out not to be crimes, and the Department of Justice is not persuaded that this was material to any legitimate counterintelligence investigation. So it was not a crime.
So joining me now is Judge Andrew Napolitano, Fox News senior judicial analyst. Good to have you with us as well, Judge. Do you think, going back to the question that was posed in my introduction to you, that the tables are turning and that Michael Flynn perhaps regains his position and that James Comey is susceptible at this point to investigation, prosecution himself?
Well, whether Michael Flynn regains his former position is really up to the president. The Michael Flynn I know is an honorable person who by no means merited what he went through. But the situation with respect to James Comey, as a result of the documents that the Justice Department filed with Judge Sullivan yesterday, can only be described as grave, because we now know from those documents that there was zero good faith basis to commence the investigation of General Flynn. Now, the government enjoys immunity. If you're prosecuted and you win, you can't sue the government for prosecuting you unless there was no good faith basis for the prosecution. So Jim Comey is now exposed not only to civil liability, a lawsuit from General Flynn seeking to compensate General Flynn for the millions he lost in defending himself, but Comey is also exposed to criminal prosecution for knowingly, willfully, and intentionally violating the civil rights of General Michael Flynn, his right to fairness, we call it due process, without any good faith basis whatsoever.
Yeah, and no doubt they'll go back to that soundbite that we've played here quite a bit, where he boastfully talks about sending in agents to the White House, and General Flynn was under the understanding that he didn't need any attorney, that they weren't investigating him. Quickly on one other person who was in the Obama administration who's now coming under some attention, this Evelyn Farkas, who was a defense official, has been on MSNBC a million times, very confidently talking about how they knew that there was Russian collusion going on. Here she is on March the 2nd on that channel. Watch this.
The Trump folks, if they found out how we knew what we knew about the Trump staff's dealing with Russians, that they would try to compromise those sources and methods, meaning we would no longer have access to that intelligence. So I became very worried because not enough was coming out into the open, and I knew that there was more.
Yeah, she knew that there was more. She was a major source, I believe, for a big New York Times series on the Russia collusion, hoax, as I guess you could now call it. The president always calls it that, but it seems like there was no there. Here's what came up in the transcripts. Trey Gowdy says, why don't we go back to that sentence that I just asked you about? It says, the Trump folks, if they found out how we knew what we knew about their staff dealing with Russians, well, how would you know what the U.S. government knew at that point? You didn't work for it, did you? She says, I didn't. He says, then how did you know? And she says, I didn't know anything, according to these transcripts. What do you see here, Judge?
Well, it is a crime to lie to the FBI. We know that. It's a crime to lie under oath. Everybody knows that. It is not a crime to lie on television, but it's not very good for one's career. I really never heard of this woman until all of this came out yesterday, and more of it came out today. But she was obviously an emissary for the forces that wanted to impair or even bury President Trump. But yet when she was put under oath, she acknowledged that what she was saying on MSNBC was not true. Is she still there?
Yeah. I don't know the answer to that question, but she, was very fired up on this story so often on that channel. And she wasn't alone, obviously. There was an assumption that all of this was well-founded. And, you can sort of never get that part of this back, right? I mean, what's the impact on all of these individuals who have gone out there and, sort of been way out on this limb that has now been cut off, Judge?
Well, I think more documentation is going to come out. I don't know what else it's going to show, but thus far it has shown that the public media television face of these people is radically different from what they said when they were under oath and knew that they could go to jail if they failed to tell the truth. Radically different. This woman, Farkas, is just one of many who appear to be in that category.
Yeah. And it explains why people like Trey Gowdy, sort of couldn't say everything that he knew, having sat through these,
Right.
but kept reassuring so many people that there was, not a lot underlying that sort of was connective tissue in this story for quite some time. Judge, thank you. Always good to see you. Thanks for being here
Good
tonight.
to be with you, Martha.